Thank you for joining For Our Special Kids, where we openly and honestly discuss the magic and the mess of raising a child with special needs. We are thrilled to have you here and hope this time provides you with some wonder and wisdom. I'm your host, Jennifer Lansing. Let's get started. Hello. Before I introduce this episode, I wanted to acknowledge that I got Teal's cold. And boy, can you hear it in my voice. I recorded this episode with Denise Correll before the sinus pressure set in, so you will not have to endure this voice for too much longer. All right. I invited Denise Correll to join us today because of her extensive experience within the special needs educational community. She is the perfect blend of what we talk about here on the show. There's some concrete content and then there's some woo-woo content. And this episode is a reflection of that mix. So we talk about how to prepare for IEPs, what our parental rights are, and how asking for what we and our children need is imperative to the process. We talk about how to best prepare for the IEP conversation from a more spiritual perspective, but also a concrete planning perspective. I do believe actually that we can send energy into the meeting ahead of time to help manifest the best environment for our children and their teachers and therapists and us. Per usual, I cry and Denise cries. And actually, while I was editing, I cried again, just listening. So that was fun. But the stories we both share are pretty neat and moving. At the end of the conversation, Denise brings up summer and how we can reach out to get assistance and also get a little creative with our approaches to those sometimes dreaded 2.5 months off. So all of our conversation inspired me, and I hope it inspires you as well. I hope you enjoy and let me know what you think. I am with one of my favorites, Denise Correll. I'll do the quick intro and then we're just going to jump right into it. So Denise is a psychic medium who has been highly sensitive since she was very young. She's able to connect with the energies present in a person's life as well as those in spirit. As an empath, Denise deeply feels emotions and often physical symptoms a person may be experiencing. After many years hiding these talents and natural abilities, Denise is so very grateful and thankful to be able to share these gifts and be of service in bringing through messages to help people find and connect with their own inner knowing and light. Denise also co-hosts the podcast Enlightened Empaths, one of my favorites. Prior to fully stepping into this work, however, Denise was a special education teacher for many, many years. She lived all over the country and taught all grade levels from pre-K through community college. Pre-K to community college? Holy geez. Okay, her undergraduate degree is in emotional disturbance, and she has a master's degree in educational leadership with postgraduate work in education and counseling. Denise is also my mentor and I adore her. So thank you for joining us, Denise.
Well, thank you for having me. And I adore you too.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yes.
Thanks for saying that. So here's the thing. I asked you to come on and I wanted you to dust off your special education hat.
Right. It's a little dusty, but it's still there. So it's okay.
Yeah. And you say many, many years. And I kind of chuckle because that assumes that you're really old and you're not. So I'm like many, many years in teaching. How many years were you in teaching? And tell me a little bit about that experience just to set the stage for our audience.
Okay. So I was a special ed teacher for 35 years. But prior to that, I was also I worked in group homes, state hospitals, nursing homes. So I started working on a grant for kids when I was 14 in that field. So that was a big chunk of my life, was working with people who are kind of tucked away from society, or now we would say neurodivergent or ability challenged or whatever the words might be. But that was hugely my life for many, many decades.
You were 14 working on a grant? Tell me about that.
They had a program for low-income kids through the government back in the time when I was that age. And so they load us They loaded us all on a bus and brought us to a state hospital and put us on a ward to work with people as a work experience kind of situation. But when I think back of a 14-year-old going onto a locked ward with people with pretty serious mental health issues, it was a different time.
Yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
Whoa. So that obviously affected you more maybe in a positive way than negative, because I could see that being a very traumatic experience for a
Mhm.
14-year-old.
Especially if we get into a sensitive I mean, I wasn't your typical I was a really good student, I was quiet, I was under the wire, and there were some hooligans on that bus that they took up there. So it was a whole different experience, but it also opened some big doors for me.
Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
Well, in the sense of realizing how fragile people can be and how dismissive some people can be towards people who may not fit the parameters of what's seen as socially acceptable. And I think we've come a long way with that. But back then it was very much, we used to bring everyone on field trips. And that was part of the thing. They would take all of the people off of from this facility and take them around. That was part of this whole grant that provided the money for the children to go up there and work. And we would go into, oh, we'd go to beaches, we'd go to fast food restaurants, and just to see the reaction of the people was so extreme because it was fear, it was unknown, it was and I think sometimes we still see glimpses of that now, and we've come so far, we've come ridiculously far, but we still haven't quite reached that place that I know we can get to where it's about acceptance of, and
Yeah. As you say that, I heard a story of a mom who had a child with autism 20 years ago. They told her, just 20 years ago, this was 2000. Oh, you should just put him away.
Mhm,
I
yeah,
mean, the listeners can't see my face, but I'm appalled at that statement. And
right.
yet that's having come a long way.
Right. That's, well, the precursor to being on the bus was I have a younger brother who had some now would be neurodivergent. He's fine. He's a grown man. He's functioning member of society, all of those things. But the things, and I think I shared this the last time I was on your show, the things that they said to my mother as far as horrific, limiting, di so disrespectful to her, but also to my brother, and the impact it has on a familial level is such a huge, huge part of this whole field.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's why you kind of went down that road
Mhm.
is you saw that there's change that could be had, hopefully.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I can't believe you said 35 years. I mean, that seems like ridiculous. You look like you're 35. So, okay, maybe a little older than 35.
Thank you. My BS filter just kinda started to bing, bing, bing.
I'm sorry. Okay,
That's okay.
a little older than 35, but I mean,
Yeah.
you do not look like you spent 35 years teaching and now have done this for many years. So
Well, I was young. I
good
was
on
young when
you.
I
You
started. We'll go
started
with
at
that.
14. You started at 14. That still doesn't
No,
work.
but
It still
no, I
doesn't compute.
graduated college early, but not that early.
All right. Well, sorry. Okay. So one of the things that we chatted about ahead of time was this whole IEP. We're moving into summer, like all of these things. There's like mad emails going around between parents and schools now. Like, when can we schedule this IEP? There's 20 people on an email and we're trying to find one date. I mean, it's a lot of pressure just even trying to schedule an IEP and then trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to mentally, physically, emotionally prepare, spiritually, even prepare for this meeting? So, would you start with, from a teacher's perspective, how How do you or how did you approach the IE process? And then we can, I think, look at how can we as parents be better prepared for that?
One of the benefits to having taught at so many different levels and in several states, so I have a pretty diverse outlook on it. It's not limited to I started in one district and stayed the whole time. So there is variance between districts, between schools in specific districts. It really there's a lot of flux. But what I know is some from an educational perspective, I have worked in school settings where the IEP was actually used for the intent of being a tool to mark the progress of the student. And it was truly individualized, and it was about academic and functioning and behavior and a very holistic approach, a very team approach. Equally, I've been in districts where the teachers have been so overloaded, it's just basically a form, you fill it out, you get it signed, you don't touch it again until you have to go back into a meeting again. And I think, that's never portrayed to parents, that's never portrayed because you're sitting there, and what really influenced me a lot is I did, some graduate work at the University of Oregon with Barbara Bateman, who was one of the original law people for special education. She wrote one of the first papers on learning disabilities in 1962. She worked with neurodivergent people in the 50s. She's passed. She passed last year. Incredibly brilliant woman, but I took law classes from her. So I got very versed in the federal and the state laws that support IDEA and all of the other aspects that your listeners are quite familiar with by now. So I think that making it a tool, but one of the things she said is, and I always loved this, she said if she always was a huge advocate of having the student in the meeting so that the focus could stay on the student. She was also a huge advocate of if the student can't be there, have a picture, nice frame picture, put that right on the table so everybody remembers that it's not about hitting a goal. It's not about did they meet this level? Are they how many standard deviations away from the norm? Did we meet the deadline of 30 to 65 days for the initial eval to happen? It's about a human being, and it's about a human being that someone loves very much. That's their baby, and they want the best for them. And I have witnessed many, many times where parents were not invited as a vital part of the team. They were overwhelmed. They felt intimidated. They may not know what questions to ask. And morally, I think that's wrong because it all happens at school. But the reality is, the parents know their babies and their children and see behaviors that they may not be seen in a public school setting or a private school setting.
I'm fighting back tears. I was a couple minutes ago when you're talking because it's my baby.
Mm,
And
yeah,
nobody really wants to hear how far behind a baby is, right? Like nobody really wants
right.
to hear that. Nobody wants what can come across as criticism, right?
Hmm.
And that is, as you were just sitting there, I'm like, oh, right, we've got one May 1st. It's coming up. The
Yeah.
IEP is coming up and I have to prepare. And I think what you mentioned about what Barbara Bateman, you said,
Yes.
she is spot on. It is about the child. And it's even to take that step further, it is about my baby.
Hmm.
And maybe if teachers and therapists and everyone who's involved in the IEP process could also remember that it's not just a person, it's oh my gosh, this is this mama's baby. And
Right.
when mama bear gets a little anxious and maybe gets a little aggressive with her words, this has never happened. I'm not that person. No, I am, obviously. I mean, I get very heated and I want to defend and I try to listen and I try to stay open, but it is my baby that we're talking about and I want the
Right.
best for her. So it's a interesting dialogue, which is what that picture does, or bringing the child into the actual meeting.
And to give you credit, what you're doing now by setting these parameters while your daughter is still in a younger grade, a lower grade, is you're not allowing her to get pulled into the system and just moved along. You're advocating, you're listening, you're making sure the services are provided. Whereas, and there's a different level of parental involvement with an preschool, elementary, early middle school versus middle school, high school, or when someone is transitioned to adult services. There's an odd mix. And I think for me as a mom, it doesn't matter if your child is 7, 17, 27, 37. There is still a part of you, or as a parent, I shouldn't limit that to being a mom, as a caretaker, as someone that you love for a small children, there's a part of you that is always going to be protective and want the best for that person.
Yes,
And
my
when
mother
you
included. She would probably beat someone up if they were mean to me. I mean, it doesn't change, and I'm a heck of a lot older than 37. It's true. It's just that it's just who we are when we have our babies. And it's funny because she'll still say I'm her baby, and I'm like, "Wah," and I'm like, well, no, I get it now. I am
Mhm.
still her baby, just like Teal will forever be my baby.
Right.
Yeah.
Eh, well, I just think going into the IEP, because that was
Yeah.
your question, and I kind of diverted with that, is taking care of yourself. And if we wanted to go a little woo with that, is get really grounded, take a deep breath. If you have to go into a restroom and do Wonder Woman pose and tell yourself you've got this, but if you need to bring an advocate so that you're not sitting there alone, all of those are things to do, but also energetically picture a buffer, picture a shield, picture that you can protect yourself energetically, because I've sat as a parent in those types of meetings. I've sat as a professional in those types of meetings. As a parent, it can be intimidating, it can be overwhelming. A lot of times, what I find very, very offensive is when professionals start using vocabulary or jargon that isn't mainstream for people who may not understand. And okay, great, it makes you sound smart, but that's not why you're there. So if you don't understand something, ask. Just say,
Well,
"I'm sorry, could you please re-explain that? That doesn't make sense to me."
and acronyms, holy
Yeah.
jeezy Joe. When people use acronyms, I have no problem stopping them and being like, I need to know what that one means.
Yep.
There are so many. I mean, I used to work in clinical research. You want to talk acronyms? Hello.
Mhm.
And I had to be the naive new person that said, I don't know what that acronym means. But then also across school districts, sometimes, or across clinical trials or companies, acronyms change.
Right.
Like the same acronym can mean something different. So if you're going down one road and you don't understand it, by all means, yeah, ask, ask, ask. So as you were talking, I realized I used to write down things ahead of time, not just
Mhm.
questions, but behaviors that I was seeing or things that I wanted addressed, but not necessarily in a question form. And so I used to take some time, and I need to do this again before it's so good that I'm talking to you, that I need to like phrase things. Like if I'm having trouble saying something, I want to make sure that I practice it. Maybe I have the conversation with my husband or an advocate or a friend, and I just say, "Hey, I'm going to say this, and just let me know how it comes across." Cuz I said something to the principal of our school today, and Alex was like, "Jen, she could have taken that the wrong way." And I'm like, "Oh, right.
Mhm.
Sorry about that."
But was it just being direct and honest?
Well, I mean, that's my nature, but I'll tell you exactly what happened. Teal, for some reason, whatever, when she comes to school, she starts sneezing like a crazy person. And
Mhm.
she might not sneeze here at home ever. And then they're like, oh, she sneezed 10 times today. And it's true. They're not making that up. And I said to the principal, I don't know, there must be some mold or dust or something in that school system that she just really is bothered by. He literally was like, that probably didn't come across too well. And I was like, oh, all right, I'll have to go apologize. But
Oh,
anyways,
okay, I'm not seeing that as a bad one. That wasn't a direct slam on anyone.
all
No.
right. Well, it's kind of a new school. So, anyways, so I was just, I think using words that are kind is probably it's one of your favorite words. I know, like being
Yes.
kind.
Yes. And also, this is, I'm not being a negative Nancy, but if you if they try to gloss over something that you want more information on, bring that conversation back, hook that right back and drag it back in because you're so much and this is one of my I'm very, very passionate about this is how procedural safeguards are brushed over, the parental rights aspect. I have worked in districts where I was there long enough to watch children grow and evolve and get to know the families, and the parents had no clue what their rights were. And that's a federal level. That's not a state level. There are federal guidelines and laws that override anything that's happening at a state level.
Can you give us examples? Because there might be a lot that I don't even know, or a place
Sure.
that we could go to. I mean, I can look at. I'm truthfully, I'm pretty naive with all this, even though she's 6.5.
No, but that's good that you're right, and there are so many resources online, and you can find these, but let's just start with the procedural safeguards. These are designed to protect the rights of parents and a child at the same time, and they give families and school systems a lot of ways to resolve disputes because that's another thing that, get the duct tape and zip the mouths is that school districts live in desperate fear in special ed situations that there's going to be a due process case. That's what they fight against. And I'm not saying this in every district, and I am not making that a blanket statement. It's just things I've observed at different parts. And maybe since I've left the profession, that's all magically fixed now. But a lot of confidentiality is huge. And I think that that is something that needs to be really respected on so many levels, especially if you're in a small town or especially if there's an interwoven system of people that know each other, confidentiality for the rights of the parents, but also for that student. And parents have the right to inspect and review any educational records for their child. The right for parents to participate in meetings related to the identification, evaluation, and placement of their child. And it's all in order to provide a free and appropriate public education for their child. And that if you homeschool, and even some of these guidelines, even private schools still have to follow federal guidelines. If you are not happy with the testing that's been done for your child in the district that they're in, you can request an independent education evaluation at no cost to you. It's at cost to the district. Another thing that is a federal guideline, a procedural safeguard, is prior written notice. You need to have at least a 7-day window that there's going to be a meeting or any change in an IEP, anything related to identification, evaluation, placement, provision of free and appropriate public education there has to be a prior written notice. And countless times I've seen people sit down at an IEP meeting and a form is slid across it. You wouldn't mind signing this real quick. We tried to get a hold of you, but we couldn't. Please pay attention to what you're signing because you should have that ahead of time. You always, always as a parent have the right to give or deny your consent before a school can give any action with your child, can take any actions with your child. You have the right to disagree with decisions. And these are all, so there's simple things like, can they hold a meeting without me? Can they have an IEP meeting without me? Actually, there's one state, I believe it's Georgia, but I'm not specifically sure on that. They don't even have to let you know they're starting special ed services. There are many states, and I wrote this down because I really was kind of horrified. It's been a while since I've been out. Um, there's several states that have, maybe I didn't write it down, that you don't have to have, there should be a 3-year evaluation given at all times to make sure that there is, that everything is still on point. Make sure they're actually doing an evaluation and not just doing a records review. It
Oh,
happens. Make sure the testing that's done is relevant, updated, and measuring where your child is now.
interesting. I never even thought about that.
Okay. Do you want me to just keep yammering or do you want
I
to jump
love
in?
this. I mean, well, first
Okay.
of all, I do want to give a shout out to our school system. We
Mhm.
do. I mean, all these things that you're saying, notification, they're always trying to find new ways of helping teal. I mean, we get new services or new equipment like quickly. It's great. So they are really, really wonderful. I mean, to give you an example, I signed up teal for art class on Wednesdays and it's after school. So I was like, okay, no problem. I'll clear my schedule. I'll be there. Don't worry about it. I'll just in case you need help, like I'll be there. Because I knew she wouldn't have an aide like for it.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, Teacher Bensley says, "Hey, Jen, it's covered by her IEP. We just need to add a little insert here that she can have, if she wants to do extracurricular services, anything extracurricular. And that includes, you guys, listen, if your son or daughter wants to play basketball or wants to be in drama or anything, that's included and you can ask for it and you can say, I want my daughter to be a part of that. And so it needs to be included. I had no idea. And you know what? If
Yeah.
she hadn't proactively looked or asked, I would have never known. So thank you, Dr. Bensley, because she's great. But go ahead.
That that makes my heart sing because that's the point. That is the point, and it didn't take away from anyone else in the classroom. It didn't take away from, anyone else's they weren't being asked to do something else in addition to. It was a related service that was relevant. And I think with the concerns about financial stability in a lot of institutions, they may try to pull the money card on you. And okay, going in the other direction for a minute, I've seen some pretty ridiculous requests for that because, he needs to have a brand new iPad here, one at home, one on the bus. We need this, we need that. That one's outdated. I mean, if it's relevant for educational services, that's fine. But I think some people just want to push the envelope, and that's not cool either.
Yeah, there does need to be teamwork and
Yeah,
understanding on both levels. Completely agree with you on that.
right. But you nailed something that's so, so important, Jen. You keep open communication.
Yeah, they yes, those poor
Uh,
people.
No, 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 that's a good thing. That's a good thing because they're not going to slide for your daughter because they know you're involved, you're there, and I know that you've been very open that you have the luxury to be able to change your schedule. You've had you have supports, you have situations that some people may not have. But it doesn't change the fact that the district has the resources. All districts have the resources to provide for your children.
How much of that decision-making process is money-based from your perspective? Like, I've actually had people say, "Oh, no, they want your child in their school because they get funds that they wouldn't
Oh,
normally get." And so tell me a little bit more about
but
that
there's
and
a whole formula with that for on a state level and a federal level. On a state level, and this is just the states that I have experience in, so it may be different where people are located. There is they go by what the identifying characteristics are, how much money that brings in per child, how many, and that can often add to other grant monies that support that because of that. Also, the states often get reimbursed from the federal government for higher. So again, not I'm not going to disclose where this was. I worked in a district where there was an inordinately high amount of students identified because it was financially very lucrative for that district to have a lot of kids, and they hired extra people who they could move around, and I remember going to this, I was young, and I said, "Statistically, that you can't have that many people in any given demographic identified with that. That's not accurate." And I didn't say it like I wasn't crappy about it, but
well, that wasn't
I
mean.
was
I was just imagining them thinking, "Who's this young whippersnapper telling
yeah,
us?"
yeah, and I had just moved there and I whatever, but I it's it is a money game. It is a money game in the sense too of If you knew that your daughter needed a specific adaptive equipment that was expensive, and it's the district's responsibility to pay for that, and they're trying to find a way to convince you that she doesn't need that adaptive equipment, that's something you wanna fight for.
That's really good to hear again, not in our school systems, how because we're very, very blessed, but that is so good as a parent to remember. Like,
Mhm.
and is it okay? I guess I should ask, is it okay to say, I know you guys get funding for my daughter, and that funding needs to be allocated to what she needs?
Right, and if you it's this is probably not a popular answer, but when I've done work with part of getting my advanced degrees in other classes is the finance part of things. It's a shell game. School districts are playing a shell game, and sometimes the monies get allotted to where they really should go, and sometimes they don't. But knowing what your rights are, and what's really cool is even if you just Google IEP and the name of your state, it's going to lead you to the state website, which is going to have all of this information. You can go to you just put in a Google for federal guidelines for IEP, it's gonna bring you a plethora of information. But I think, you nailed it when you said practice. Practice what you're going to say, become more articulate. If you're not sure of what something means or you don't understand it, find someone you trust that will. Because one of the things, and I don't even know why this popped into my head, but if you have a student that does have a child that has a lot of related services, they get speech, OT, PT, all of there's a list, and they're getting direct services, and it's on the IEP. We'll meet with speech twice a week for 20 minutes, X amount, blah, blah, blah. Pay attention to when they switch that to a consult. Because at some point when your child, I'm sorry, I keep using the word student, when the child has mastered a certain level and they may say, well, we can't really do much more with the program we have, they're going to switch it to a consult on the IEP. And they may put in there, and this is depending on where your child is, and they'll change it to consult 20 minutes once a month with the special ed teacher or with the classroom teacher. Very hard to document that. Very hard to document that anyone is actually checking in with your child to see if they're still maintaining the goals that the skills that they've learned over time.
So if it's I'm just going to stop. There's my alarm for 11:11, which means remember, you're a spiritual person, not just a human person. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry,
I
that was
love
going
that.
off, but it is a little
I
11:11.
think that was perfect.
11:11, right? It's like every day
Mhm,
it goes off, and I'm like, right, I'm a spiritual person. So I forgot to turn that off. But hey, there you go. A little
mhm.
reminder for everyone: we're spiritual beings. Uh, so if we do see the word consults, what do we do?
Ask specifically what that means. Is there any kind of observation of your child? Is there a checklist? Is it just a conversation when the special ed teacher and the speech pathologist are leaving the building on a Friday afternoon? Hey, what's going on? Okay, good. Glad to hear it. Boom, check it off the list. We're done. And I'm not saying that's common practice, but make sure you understand what's involved with a consult so that it's not impacting your child's services.
And as you were talking, I realized you can also ask to be in that consult.
You can.
I mean, I ask a lot of times. I'm sure they just love me. That was sarcasm. I ask all the time. I'm like, hey, can I pop in and just see a PT session? Hey, can I pop in and see
Mhm.
when OT's in there working with her? I just want to watch.
And they're open to that.
Yeah,
Okay. So that huge indicator that you're in a great district. Huge.
we are. Shout out to Tahoe. Don't move
Yeah.
here. No, I'm kidding. I've actually had people say, we've waited 9 months, 12 months to get a speech evaluation. And I'm like, oh boy, we are we are really lucky here. It's also second home income.
Mhm.
Tahoe, in other districts, they don't have as much money. We have second home income here. So
Right.
our school is really blessed. I mean, they are wonderful. So shout out to them again. But I
Yeah.
think it's so important for us to know, like you said, our rights and what we can ask for. And heck, this is a sales concept. It's okay to get a no.
Yes.
Just ask. If they say
Right.
no, ask again in a different way.
And as far as so initial IEPs, if you want your child and they've changed that, most states it's 30, 45, or 60 days. And make sure I sound like bossy boots, but some districts are going to call that 60 days on a calendar. Some are going to call it 60 school days, which changes the whole dynamic and the timeline. A lot will push out the actual evaluation and say, "Oh, we have to go through all of these things before we can evaluate. We're going to do these many observations. We're going to try these interventions. We're going RTI. We're going to do that stuff," which is okay, but make sure that if once you sign that paper that says, "I agree to this initial evaluation," the clock starts ticking. And if it's the district's responsibility to make sure those evaluations are done within that window of time.
I was going back in my head to that first evaluation of Teal. I was mortified.
Yeah.
And I actually can feel it in my heart right now. I just went right back there. I remember walking in. I remember yelling at my husband because we were going to be late and I didn't want to be late. And oh, it is. It's a lot of energy. It's
Mhm.
a lot of heaviness
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's a really good thing because it gives your child what they need. And so
Right.
if we can look differently at IEPs, it's not about criticizing your child. It's not about telling you how horrible you are as a parent because your child's not doing math like they should be. And it's not about that. It's really if we can all approach it from okay, we're a team and this is for the benefit of my baby and
Yeah.
it will give me or her or him opportunities that he or she might never have gotten if we didn't get to this process of having an IEP.
Right. And seeing the individual. I heard the coolest thing recently that this man was speaking, an older man, and he had lots of gibberish after his name. And he said so many parents feel like they're the engineer of their child's life. They feel like they have to, and it's their responsibility, and they have to make sure, and they take it. And it cracked me right up because he said, "You're not that important. You're the steward. You're here to help them navigate the life they came here to live. And they're going to have strengths and weaknesses, and they're going to fall down, and it's not about you." And I was kind of taken aback because I'm really good at making it all my fault. I think a lot of us are. You
Yes.
or that did I do, could I, should I, would I, did I? And when you look at it from that perspective of how much, and I've said this to dozens and dozens of parents over the years, how much strength it takes for that little person to go in with potential challenges or differences and navigate a world that is not set up for them. It's pretty damn impressive.
Mhm.
It really is. And I think advocating is great, not getting bulldozed is great, but also the reality is it hurts. It hurts when you see those numbers on a page or that you you look around and you see what a peer group may be doing, or you see what other parents are discussing milestones that your child isn't quite ready for yet. That's painful
Mhm.
and it's sad.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. And yet, I do believe that Teal chose this life.
100%. And there is a light, there is an essence, there is a vibrancy that, and maybe because I was so many years in that world, that you only see in people that are just looking at the world from a different perspective. And I think they're here to help. I really in my soul do.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. They're here to raise the consciousness of humanity.
Mhm.
That's why they're here.
Right.
And it's why we're seeing more diagnoses, right? I put that in quotes. No, they're choosing to come in this way to say, hey, Jen, you don't need to blabber off the handle all the time on your mouth to talk to people. You can use telepathy. You can
Right.
send energy. You don't have to be in someone's presence to have them feel you. I mean, Teal just, I say magically, just does this. She
Yeah.
just exudes this, and it's her job. And I do believe what you said. All of these children, it is their purpose in this world to elevate us. It's not our job to elevate them. They're here to
Exactly.
elevate us.
Yeah.
We're the ones that are stuck in the mud down here. They're the ones that are flying high energetically and being like, dude, I do not know why you are freaking out about traffic right now. It doesn't matter. Figure out what's important, mom,
Right.
dad. This is
Right.
not it. The drudgery that you're living in.
And the find I'm going back to IEPs just for a second of always, always bring it back to the strengths. Please always bring it back to the strengths. And it may be something that a milestone for your child. Maybe they don't understand what a big deal that is or what a big step or what that is, but it doesn't matter because finding that in your person, in your little in whoever, we all want that. We all want to be seen for doing a good job, that we're trying, that we're stepping up, but when and that I respect and understand that districts are held to certain parameters with needing to reach educational timelines and guidelines. But if you do have a child on an IEP, push the envelope to make sure that they're meeting all of your child's needs, not just the ones that they can check off a box.
That's a huge one. And it's hard because they all have to be measurable goals. Well,
Mhm.
how do you measure some of these things?
Right.
When they say, oh, is she socially da 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 da? It's like, well, okay, how do you really measure that? I mean, I guess eye contact. Oh, we took a video and watched how much she looked up at the teacher. Right? I mean, I'll tell you, we went to the science fair last week, and I haven't talked about this. It hit me like, oh, you have to share this with people. For the first time in my life as a mom, I couldn't find my daughter. She had two friends with her the last time I looked down. She was at a table doing some science stuff with two friends. And all of a sudden, they walked off and they went somewhere. And I my daughter walked off with her friends.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I bawled my eyes out. And all the parents are like, what's wrong? I'm like, I can't find Teal. It's fantastic. It was this very weird thing. But what I'm saying is that was a social milestone for her that is not expressed in her IEP, right? There's no one going to say, like, oh, she checked that box.
No, but that is more important and vital and rich and perfect than any damn box that's gonna be checked.
I know. And
That is she had friends to take off with and do age-appropriate stuff.
I know,
Beautiful,
like
beautiful, beautiful.
ditching their parents.
And I'm so glad you were there to experience
Oh,
that.
me too. Me too. And I guess maybe that's just to kind of tie a bow on that is that more important than math and numbers? No, but at the same time, I believe that math and numbers will come. We'll
Yes.
we'll get there. I mean, she's gonna need to know how much that Gucci bag costs someday, right? Or why the business pass tickets are so expensive. Like she's gonna need to know those. But it's right now that social milestone was just a magical moment for me. So yeah,
And one that you couldn't have even perceived a year ago.
I couldn't have perceived that 6 months ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's but I truly in my heart think all of the energetic work, the opening up, the connecting telepathically, all the work you've been doing outside of is so, uh, I I have no doubt it's a huge part of that.
Yeah. So let's go there for just for our ending because we only have a few more minutes here with you. By the way, I love you. Uh, if I haven't said that already, I kind of did already. But anyways,
Mm,
on an energetic level, what can our parents do? You mentioned grounding and those things, but would you
right.
walk us through what that actually means to you? Like, what is grounding? Because a lot of people don't even know what that means. Like, oh, did they hook themselves up to a copper cord? And that's an option too for grounding.
It is, but if you start feeling really spacey, if you start bumping into things, if you start losing your balance, just take a minute, and for me, it's going outside and getting fresh air, standing and feeling roots coming out of my feet, touching a tree, getting something that really brings you back to that earth energy. If you like to garden, if you some people can get that from drinking water, some people get that from carrying a dense like an obsidian or something in their pocket. Uh, Before we leave, I just want to touch real quickly on you had mentioned it earlier, the transition time of going into summer with, there's extended school year program, there's all of those things. And I thought about what about if that's not an option? And what I came up with was you do what you do with any child. You go to the library, you go to the rec center, you swim in the river, you finger paint, you go to the movies and watch movies you don't want to see. But I think when you have a child that has extra needs, desires, cares, whatever, it means finding a network of like-minded people who might be able to give you some respite from time to time and say, would Tia like to join us? We're going to the movies. And then another time you could say, you know what? We're going to the beach today. Do you want to, can we bring your child with us? So you're working on the social development, but it's also just no matter what, they're still just kids and they want summer as much as the rest of us.
Well, that's what, as you were talking, I'm like, well, what did I like to do in the summer?
Yeah.
Like, there you go. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I need to do with Teal, or find someone. If I have to work, find someone that can do it with Teal.
Right. And
And,
if
mm,
if you have eh, uh, if you live by where there's a teachers college, there are teachers in training or special ed, or if there is there's usually camps that are if you want your child to be in a specific camp, usually the waiting lists are quite significant, but you can get in. There's a lot of interconnected schools. I taught at a preschool in Corvallis, Oregon, 100 years ago. And what I loved is that model it was half identified and half not. And the little kids didn't know the difference. They don't care. 3 to 5, they don't care.
no,
But they all did all of the activities together. They all had equal access. They all had that. And that's what we're talking about with the IEP, with the programming, with the transition to summer is equal access to quality of life.
that's a human right.
Yeah.
A
So sorry
human.
for the rant.
No, it was a great rant and a very appropriate because we were going to talk about summer and then I just took us all into the IEP road. So I think that's something that over the next couple of weeks, I'll start figuring out like, okay, how do we talk about summer as a family? But what you're saying is just approach it like a normal family, just a family.
Yes, and if you need supports, I mean, extended school year program can be wonderful. There are guidelines in place for that at the state and federal level. There's sometimes they'll call it summer school. Sometimes there are rec programs. Sometimes there are, I think a lot of times if you're in a small town, there are amazing opportunities at the local level. Is there a local park where they offer things for kids? Is there a high school student who wants to train to be a nurse that would love to be a nanny type person for your child for the summer? Even just to take your little person to the park so that you can have 20 minutes to do what you need to do for yourself.
One of our Teal's newest babysitter is actually going to come on. I'm going to do an interview with her for What's It
Nice.
Like because her sister has pretty severe CP, and she is amazing with Teal. I mean, Alex
Mhm.
walked out of one of like their time together and was like, I don't know what she's doing, but my gosh, Teal loves her. Like,
Yeah.
it's because she gets it. I
Yeah.
mean, she understands. And so that's another option, is to find older children or even adults that have some sort of a challenge and see if they have
Yes.
siblings that can help. Cause that was,
Yes.
whoa, mind blowing to me. I'd never
Right.
thought about that.
And it's not, it's just having that experience of knowing, because I would guarantee that this person is sensitive to you as well as to Teal, because
Mhm.
she understands, or he, she, they understands the familial impact.
Oh, she asked questions that I was like,
Yeah.
oh, you totally get it. I mean, she immediately was like, okay, let's talk about food and feeding and what do I need to
Mhm.
be aware of and textures. And I, nobody asked those questions. I was like,
Yeah.
what? What? I don't have to be the one to bring this up. She was, yeah, she's a senior in high school. I'm so mad. Like,
But
oh.
but that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And if you have an in with maybe a pediatrics office or someone that might have access there, I think people are looking for, you nailed it a minute ago. Find some kind people who want to appreciate your child as much as you do.
That's your word, my dear. Just
Yeah.
be
I'm a
kind.
big fan of kind.
I know you are. You're a kind
Yeah.
person.
Well,
And
thank you.
thank you for spending time with us.
Oh, I love you. It's always a joy.
It's so
If
much
there's
fun.
anything I can do, let me know. Yes.
Denise will be on next week again. I think I said you're going to be my co-host the last time I interviewed you.
I think you did. Yes.
Your co-hosting abilities are really bad. You've only done this twice.
That's true. We'll have to work on that.
Thank you so very much. I do have one question for you. We're changing the end of show question because we just went into season 2. And
Ooh.
yeah, I know. Deep breath for me. That's huge. Is okay. Tell me one experience that you've had with a child with special needs that you remember and spoke to your heart. You have
Oh,
800,000. I know. I know.
it's like a Rolodex
I
going
know.
90 miles an hour.
Oh.
I had a student at the high school level who had always been pigeonholed into at a full-time ed tech all through 12 years, never had been given any independence, never had been given any, it was one of those push him through, and he came into my program. We ran a commercial kitchen, and I had him running an industrial toaster and using a big, professional coffee maker and running the griddle, and I didn't put him on the fryer because that would have been too much. What I loved was he brought his mother in to show what he was doing, and she came over, I'm gonna cry, I'm sorry. She came over and she hugged me and she said, "We do this at home now. We make the foods that he makes here, and he tells me all about it." And fast forward that a little bit more, he went to the local Dunkin' Donuts and got a job because he just wanted to work in that environment and run the toaster. But what I loved about that was not only did it empower him to realize, and he did a project with his ed tech in the academic classes on how to make bagels from hand, but homemade
Oh,
bagels,
wow.
and came in on one of my prep periods, and he and the ed tech made the bagels, and he ran them through and compared them to, and they did. So it was just something that no one could have ever dreamed he was capable of doing. And I think that's what I love, is when we let people become who they really came here to be, not who we think they're only allowed to be.
That's a good story.
Sorry, it was kind of a rant, but
Why are you sorry? It's a great
yeah,
story and not a rant, and
yeah,
hugely valuable for them and
yeah.
for you. For you, I can see.
Oh, that's why I stayed so long.
I know. I know. The world misses you, but you're doing
Yeah.
good things now.
Yes, different things.
Yes, I'll put all of your information, but if people want to find you, they can go to gratefulmessenger.com, and that's where all of your amazing services are.
Well, thank you.
Classes and readings, and I know you're working on some other new things, which
Yeah.
we're waiting desperately to
Well,
hear
thank
what's
you.
coming next.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's helping a lot of people.
No, I hope so. It's helping me selfishly. All right, my dear, thank you so much, and we will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found one or two meaningful nuggets of information to make your day better. If you think there's value in what we do, please take a moment to tell another friend, family member, or a caregiver. We'd love to hear from you at forourspecialkids@gmail.com. You can send in a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like to learn more about, or if you'd like us to highlight a certain person, please send that information to us. It makes our show so much better and so much more valuable for you. Our Facebook and Instagram handle is For Our Special Kids. And finally, remember to witness the wonder and the wisdom within yourself and others. Until next time.